To the cloud server. Okay, so here we go. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. That's a quote by Seneca. Welcome to today's episode. And if you've ever felt like you've got the ideas, the passion, and the drive to make a real impact, but you're not sure how to take it to the next step, then this conversation's for you. Today, we're going to be talking about something that sits behind the scenes of great work: funding, visibility, and the power of relationships. Because the truth is, you can't make change if no one knows who you are or what you're doing. And you can't grow if you're always bootstrapping. And you can't do it alone. This is an important conversation, not just for people who are chasing grants, but for anyone wanting to contribute meaningfully. Whether you're a purpose-driven business, a creative, a social enterprise, or something in between, the game changes when you learn how to stand out, collaborate, and attract the support you need. To help us get clear on all of this, I'm joined today by Liz Fleming, a brilliant grant strategist, writer, and advisor who has helped countless organisations access the funding they need to do extraordinary things. Liz knows how the system works, but more importantly, she knows how people can work the system without losing their soul. So let's dive in. Hello, Liz.
Hi, Kerryn. Thanks for having me today.
It's wonderful to have you, and having had you speak to my business community, I know that our conversation is going to prompt some thinking by the listeners who are wanting to make an impact but are maybe cut short by funding. So, in setting the scene, what do you think it means to stand out in the context of businesses and organisations seeking impact?
I think it's being prepared, and as you said at the start, I think knowing what you want to do. And that doesn't mean down to the finest detail, but having that high level strategic outlook of your organisation, no matter what, whether it's for-profit, not-for-profit, community group, social enterprise, you need to know what your ultimate, not end game is, but what you want to achieve. Who do you want to impact? How do you want to do it? And then we've got that essence to be able to overlay that with the funding opportunities that are out there. Because if we don't know that, no one else knows that, and then we cannot match that funding.
So why do you think it's so hard for people to ask for money and to position themselves appropriately in the grant space?
That's a really interesting question, because I think it comes down to money mindset, whether that be a personal money mindset, a business money mindset, just an overall money mindset is lacking in some shape or form. So I'm a chartered accountant. Money finance is my gig, but I don't have the answer of why people don't like applying for the government grants. I think it's a combination of not knowing the process, not knowing the system. They might have been rejected once in the past and they've never gone back. Not understanding that they need to invest in this to make it happen and be successful. And also understanding where the government are coming from. So ultimately, with grants and funding, they're trying to outsource things to everybody else. They've realised, hey, we're not so good at this or efficient. We're going to allow other organisations across Australia to do this work for us and achieve our objectives that we're trying to help their constituents and their voters to get them back in. So they're trying to create their own impact through what we do. But I think it's just an unknown thing. I think a lot of people also go into business or even charities and not-for-profits, as you say, bootstrapping it themselves with their own funds, and they don't actually realise that there are opportunities out there where the government will give you money that doesn't have to be paid back to either continue what you're doing, fast track it, or have that greater impact. So I think it's just not knowing. And then also, if they don't know where to start. They don't know who to go and talk to. And then they're like already busy, got no resources or limited resource, no extra resources, that they just becomes too hard basket. And, you know, if you don't apply for a grant, you've missed out completely and you're not wondering. And so if you don't start that process, then, again, it's just something that goes on the wayside and to the bottom of the pile, or not even on the pile, and they've carried on and forgotten about it.
So you mentioned that you were a chartered accountant. So how did you get into running the Grants Club, and what's been your journey?
Yeah, so I spent 15 years in mainly energy sector in the finance team after starting my career at KPMG as an auditor. So always been in business and around different businesses. Then when I was living in regional Victoria at a coal mine that I'd moved there for, that contract was up. I wanted to stay in the area, took my first job in government, state government agency, where I was corporate services director, and I was responsible for the grants team, and that just opened my eyes to like, wow, there's all this funding and grants and money out there that people just don't know about. And so being exposed to all of that, developing some grant programs for businesses and stuff. And I think I always wanted to work for myself. That was my ultimate aim in life. But I think I always imagined that would just be contract after contract, not actually creating a business or a brand. And how did I get into the grants? I'd left corporate, I'd gone back to corporate, left that, did a stint in bushfire recovery, left that because I wasn't able to have the impact that I wanted for the local community. Went out on my own, started business mentoring as a full-time gig that I'd been doing for small business mentoring services as well. And then some grants came out that I had developed when I was at the government agency, and all my clients could apply, and they were like, we don't know what to do. What do you mean you don't know what to do? Just fill out the form and off you go. So I did all those applications, we got them all, and then it just started from there, because I realized that this was something that business owners, organizations just knew nothing about, didn't know how to do. And I could overlay my finance skills, my time in government on the other side, knowing how the system works, and my love for strategy and problem solving to really help businesses get the funding that they deserve.
I'm sure it would be incredibly rewarding. Could you share a project where a grant helps take something from idea to real world impact that you've been involved with?
Absolutely. So a couple of years ago, a client of mine, they are kitchen cabinet makers in regional Victoria, and they couldn't get staff. Cabinet makers is a bit of a dying trade, but they had so many people on their books. They had a waiting list of nearly 12 months, got to a point where they weren't even going out and quoting, because they were like, well, no one really wants to wait 12 months for a kitchen. They were, high-end kitchens, and they were like, we need this machine, but it was about $300,000, something that they couldn't get finance for in its entirety. They applied for a grant to, back then, this was a few years ago when the government was helping businesses to purchase such equipment items, and they didn't get the full, they still had to finance some of it themselves. But that machine, the router machine, whatever it is, ended up meaning that they could increase production threefold, and their waiting list went down to like a month or so. And they weren't relying on getting more cabinet makers, because it was basically taking away some of that manual work, and that has allowed their business to grow and grow and grow, because that machine can work 24 hours as long as there's an operator, and just reorganization of their business in terms of not taking away jobs. They couldn't get staff. They could not get staff in regional, and that's the same in the cities. So I think there can be a balance of creating efficiencies, buying more equipment, and creating other jobs. So now they've got more jobs in their sales and their quoting to be able to facilitate that, to be able to make the kitchens quicker and service their clients. And that was a massive grant. As I say, it was a few years ago. Those kind of grants aren't around so much now, but it also does show that they were ready. We'd planned that. We're like, that is the ultimate. We need that machine, because that is the only way we can increase our production, decrease our waiting times, and increase our customer service to our customers who want to kit. The thing was, they had people come to them saying, we will wait 12 months because we want a kitchen from you because of the quality. And it was them that was like, we can't have a 12-month waiting list. That's just not how we operate.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's one of my favorite stories. And they've been clients for years, and I still keep in contact with them, and they're just going gangbusters. And then they also, in terms of the staffing, they again got creative, and apprentices. They've got 2 women apprentices on staff now, and I think they've actually qualified. They've been with them for 3 or 4 or 5 years. So such a good story, and all in regional Victoria.
Yeah, fantastic. So obviously it takes a lot of effort to put together a grant, and that's why people are able to work with you to get the help, because can speed things up, and also the questions to answer. But how can a small or purpose driven business make themselves grant attractive?
As I said before, I think it's being really clear about your projects, your current projects. How are you going to either continue them, grow them, and what are your future projects that you want to be able to do within your organisation? And I was just having this conversation the other day where we outlined the current projects, the flow on, what's the next step for those projects, but then it always came back to, well, but we can't do these without funding. We don't have any funding. They're not for profit. And so then we talked about, well, okay, if we can craft these projects in such a way that we can either go and proactively present to other organisations through sponsorship, or wait for a grant to come up, or be able to lobby through different mechanisms to say these are the types of projects we want, and also be able to partner with other organisations who may have funding for something similar, or not duplicating. So they're in the workforce and youth, and there's other organisations that want to do a expo, and I was like, well, what's the point of doing 3 expos in our town? Why not all come together?
It froze then, so I missed
Oh,
that. I missed what you just last said. It says my internet connection's unstable, so it said, I think it stopped where you said funding was about the last 2 sentences, I think.
okay.
Was about, yeah.
So then we need to be taking those projects, working out what we want to be doing, how we can be doing it, and what are those opportunities. It might be through sponsorship, reaching out to businesses proactively to say, hey, we want to run these events, we want to run this particular program. And also thinking about your partnerships. So making sure we're not duplicating. Don't run the same event that someone else is going to run the next month. Why not pull your resources together, pull your funds together, and do one awesome event together in partnership? You're still getting the same outcome. And I think that's the biggest thing. To be attractive, you want, in terms of funding from a government or even from another organisation, you need to be willing to work with them and collaborate. And a lot of grants we're seeing now is they are asking for, who else are you going to be working with? Are there any other service delivery partners? And they're also wanting you to have that relationship and that agreement nearly in place at the time of application. And normally when we're applying for grants, we apply today, we might not find out for 3 months. So realistically, we're sort of 6 months away from executing these projects anyway. But they're wanting us to have those relationships at the time of application, and then we can obviously foster them and agree the details closer to the time. But that's what makes people attractive to the government for the funding, and also for other organisations to be able to be the lead applicant, but know that you might be part of it, or the service delivery partner, or whatever your role might be in that project.
I always say relationships are the key.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. And I read a lot of your stuff, and I'm just like, oh, so many people need to see this, because a lot of people have a scarcity mindset of like, oh, well, I need to get that money, and why can't I get it? And someone else got it. And, yes, they're competitive, but it's also the system. We can't fix the system. We can't change it. But on the flip side of that, over the years, I've had multiple businesses and organizations say, oh, we don't really need the funding, so we won't apply. We'll let someone else get it that needs it more than us. And I'm just of the view that if you're eligible as an organization, if you're eligible as a project to apply for a grant, we need to apply. Because if we don't apply, it's a definite no. And if we do apply, it can be a yes, a maybe, a no, or it could lead to other things as well.
Sure. I'm sure there is, like I've applied for awards in the past, and even just the process helps you get real clarity about your own business and what your vision is and what you're really wanting to do and how you stand out. So what's the first step that someone would do if they were wondering if they should apply for a grant? They had this idea and they wanted to do something with it. What would the process be for them?
So I think it's really that brainstorming piece of like, okay, what's your project? Normally I say, what are you going to spend the money on when it comes to funding? So ultimately we're applying for funding, dollars, money in the bank. And so a lot of people have this idea to run a workshop, for example, easy example. And I'm like, that's cool. And they're like talking about the topic and who's going to come. I'm like, yes, but what do you need money for? Like, what do we need money for? And that's when they stumble sometimes, because they go, I don't know, because actually we don't need to pay venue. We might have some catering costs. We might have speaker costs. But then they go, oh, well, actually, but we're going to ticket this event. And I go, well, do we really need a grant? Like, and that's what we want people to be thinking. One, thinking of the ideas, but thinking, well, what are the possible funding opportunities, grants, sponsorship, tickets to get the money that we need to run it? But for other ideas, it's also about what problem are you trying to solve by having that idea or doing that project? Who's it going to impact? And why should we care about doing that project? And these are the things you've got to put yourself in the shoes of the government agencies of why should we be giving them the money to do it? Is it to fast track it? Is it to spread it out? Is it to do something new in an area that hasn't been done? Is it to help something happen that would not normally happen without that grant funding? And now also I'm seeing a lot of grants are asking the question in the applications of, if this grant is not funded fully, do you want half funding, or if you don't get this funding, what will happen to this project? Can you run without it? So again, thinking through what are those options, but ultimately idea has to be either innovative, but it has to have some type of impact that's greater than yourself. And that might sound a bit wishy-washy, but ultimately, if it's not about growth, not about efficiency, and not about impact, the government doesn't care.
I actually just wrote a newsletter this morning about how can I make a difference rather than what's in it for me, and how we need to stop having a siloed approach to life and be looking outside the box and outside the square. So what sort of things do people need to have at the ready for a grant to be put together?
So you need the basic organisation information for starters. So you need to know your ABN, your address, who's going to be the contact. You also need to know to check that eligibility in the first instance of sometimes your turnover, number of employees, where you're located. So some grants are only open to local council areas or certain areas. And then also checking the objectives of that particular grant program of, is my project that I'm thinking of actually going to do what the government wants us to do? And yes, we can get creative around that, but in the simple terms, does this meet this objectives, yes or no? And if the answer is no, in the first instance, we need to plan and brainstorm and go, well, how can we create this project and craft it in a way that it will meet the objectives, or we decide not to apply and wait for something more suitable. And then it's really about planning out those projects of coming back to, again, what do you want the money for? And going out, roughly planning it, and then going out and getting those quotes. So if it's for a piece of equipment, if it's to run a workshop, go and speak to your potential speakers or your venue and say, hey, look, I'm looking at applying for this grant. I'm thinking of this event. Can you please do me a quote? Even if there's not a grant out right now, it's much easier further down the track when the grant program is open to go back to those people, again, your relationships and your connections, to say, hey, look, this grant's come out, I want to apply. Can you just update your quote for the date, check it's still within what it should be, and then you can attach it. The problem we have is when grant programs are released, it's normally anywhere between 2 and 6 weeks that they're open. So you can just imagine most businesses and organizations and volunteer community groups and stuff are strapped for time and resource. So there's not a great deal of time to be crafting that project in that 2 or 3 weeks. Sometimes you might have to get your committee or your management team to approve the grant application in the first place. So you're just cutting yourself short if you haven't done any prep work before that. And even if it's just a 1-pager, to be like, this is the project name, this is the summary, this is what we're trying to achieve, what would it look like? We'd want this venue or one of these venues, 100 people on this day, this is what they're going to be doing, these are our costs. If you can do that to be grant ready, that will set you up for success, because one, it'll help you to work out what grants you're even searching for, and then it will help you in that really tight time frame. If you do find a grant that's suitable, it's much, much easier, because most grant applications have a whole heap of information, and as you said before, it asks questions that you might never have answered or thought about before. There might be documents that you're like, oh, the accountant's got it and they take 2 weeks. And I think we need to remember here that we're the ones applying for the grant, and everybody else that we need to rely on to get those documents don't really care. So, those time frames and everything, and even quotes, some people need 2 weeks to get a quote. So if we can be doing that early, it's going to make it much easier, because we can't normally apply for grants without a quote, without that external information. So creating all of that in its draft form beforehand is a good step.
And how important is storytelling in a grant application? Is a grant application very meat and vegetables and financially stimulated, or does input from within your network or your business or your case studies, how much value are those sorts of things to also think about to accumulate beforehand?
It's a bit of both. So remember, the government have to do their own due diligence. They're risk averse. They've got to be able to justify any money that's going out to any organisations. So there's always going to be the financials. There's always going to be the budget. There's always going to be confirmation that you can afford the co-funded matching or whatever. There's always going to be letters of support where they might be from organisations that are either going to benefit from the project or be involved in the project, and they're basically saying, hey, this is a great project, please support it. And the storytelling, so it's a bit like a job application. We've only got limited words normally. We've only got really plain text. So we've got to think of the people that are reading these applications, that we use positive language, that we're vibrant, that we're actually saying our project is the best project, please approve it, but in a way that aligns back to the objectives. And then also back to your meat and vegetables, we also need to be really blunt in using simple language to say this project is to run this event. This project is to buy this piece of equipment. And I've seen it time and time again where people forget that. They're so ingrained in their business, they're so ingrained in this project, they might have been planning for years and years and years, and then they forget to answer the actual questions that are being asked. And so reading those questions, answering the questions as they are asked, and I always say, excuse me, people need to get someone to review the application that knows nothing about it, to be able to talk back to you, tell the story back to you, to say, well, what do you think I'm actually asking for here? Because if they can't do that, then how do you know a panelist who knows nothing about you, nothing about your organisation, nothing about your project is going to give you the tick? And what I always say is we don't want to be giving them any reason to be saying no. So we don't want to leave out any documents. We don't want to leave any questions unanswered. We don't want to have leave out any strong approaches or reasons why this project should go ahead. And we also want to be writing in that positive language, so that the person reading it goes, oh, this sounds awesome. Yeah, I want this to be funded too.
I think you may have just answered it, but I was going to ask you, do you see any red flags in applications that people should avoid? And I think I hear you saying to make sure that you're answering the questions that are being asked.
That's the biggest one. And, they are getting better at using portals. They're also getting better at asking proper questions and providing guidance around what needs to be included in that response. The biggest red flag or the big thing you've got to double check is the word count. Sometimes it's in characters, sometimes it's in words. But if we are creating our grant application in a Word document as our working document, and then we can simply copy and paste it into the portal to submit. If we've got too many words, it just chops it off in the middle, and again, they don't care. So it's that refinement and the finesse and that detail that will trip people up, and making sure that our like a job application, a CV, the first few sentences are really the summary of answering the question. Don't put your best information right at the bottom because they might not even get there.
Right. And so what's one piece of advice you'd give someone listening who wants to make an impact but is feeling stuck? You know, we've both talked to an organisation that funding is just the biggest issue for them, and this often happens with not-for-profits. So, you know, if you fail at applying for a grant, can you find out why? Do they let you know why you missed out and what you need to do next time, or what advice could you give?
So if you have applied for a grant and you're unsuccessful, ask for feedback, email back whoever has given you that response. Whether they respond or not's a different story, or try and ring them and just get someone on the phone. Again, they just don't want to open the floodgates of having to personally respond. But always, I encourage everybody to ask the question, at least you've tried. But in terms of applying, and if you're stuck, the first thing is getting those ideas out of your head onto paper, onto your computer document, and then really, dedicate some time. Like, grants and funding are a long game. Doesn't matter whether you're a not-for-profit, community group, business. Everybody needs funding at some point, and everybody needs to plan for growth. So even if you take the funding layer out of it, it's like, what are we doing differently? What do we want to do differently? And then that will result in what is our impact going to be in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. Where do we want to be? So it's a real strategic outlook of your organization, and then just get your ideas down onto paper. And I swear that once you've sort of got them out of your head, got a bit of clarity of like, well, what could that look like? Who do I need to talk to? Go and get some quotes so you know whether something's going to cost you 20 grand or 100 grand, because then that will set you up for, well, what type of grants am I looking for? There is no point looking for $5,000 grants if your project is going to cost you $100,000 and you've got no funds. So matching that and aligning, that's really important. And then thinking about your partnerships, your networking, who can you talk to? And like, just ask the question. And I've been saying this a lot lately. If people don't know about your project, if you're not talking about it, they're probably not going to ask you. No one's going to come and say, hey, Kerryn, I've got 50 grand and I'd love to invest in your business or help you out or whatever. What would you spend it on? That's just never going to happen. And if it does, well done. But you need to be prepared to go to networking things, reach out to your network and say, hey, I've got this project. These are the summary of it. I think it's going to cost 50 grand. Has anyone got any ideas of how I can get this funded, how we could partner? Who's got some in kind? Who, like, there's so many different ways we can get things achieved. I'm a bit of a solutionist, problem solver, and if someone's got a way to something, an idea and wants a way to something, I'm like, there's always a way. It might take longer, it might look different, you might have to pull in different resources and your network, but there's always a way if it's something that is going to have true and meaningful impact and is also solving a problem that somebody has. That's the other thing. We can't just create the amount of people that say, oh, I've got this idea or I want to do this, so I need a grant. Well, that's just you. It's got to be bigger than you, and then it's got to be, the government have to want to see that vision as well. And so aligning that, and I think that's where a lot of people sort of get a bit confused or then go, oh, well, nobody's going to give me a grant for this, so nobody's ever going to give me a grant for anything. And I'm like, yeah, well, if that idea is such a great idea, you can probably go out and do it on your own and actually charge people. Like,
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, because I always believe there's a solution there. You just have to know the right way to find it. So there's always a way. So before we start to close off, if you were at one of my events, and we might get out the conversations count game, and it's all about sort of getting to know more about people and stretching our thinking. And funnily enough, you were just talking about money. And so the card that I would ask that I pulled out for you is, if you had $25,000, what would you do with it?
So I've got a project myself that I am working on that's in the background, to help community groups and not-for-profits understand the governance around their organisations so that they can free up their time to be efficient. So I would use the 25 grand to create that training module, that training resource, to be able to help regional and rural community groups, not-for-profits, sporting clubs, to be able to be efficient in what they're doing so that they have the confidence to apply for grants, have greater impact, and also not get burned out because they're on 5 different committees doing 5 different things and there's no standardization. So that's what I would spend the 25 grand on.
And listeners, I want you to know that I didn't know the answer to that question. We've never had that conversation before. It was not a setup. So, Liz, thank you so much. Can you share with us how people can work with you and how they can connect with you? I will put your details in the show notes, but just give us a brief rundown of how you work with your clients.
Sure. And just on that, I think that is a really important point. Everybody's got a project in them. So you either need to ask the question or you need to be telling people about it. And, you know, my particular project has been in the works in my head for probably 20 years. And through applying for a couple of different awards and stuff and getting rejected, I was like, actually, I still want to do this. So now I've, really cranked it up only in the last couple of weeks. And I also need to do that alongside the rest of my business as well. But I think, just on that, making sure you're asking, but what are you working on? What's something different? What's challenging you? What's your project that you're working on? I encourage everybody, whether you work for yourself, whether you're working for another organization, have those projects, think of those ideas, have a notebook of like, oh, that'd be awesome. Because something might come up, someone might want to collaborate. Friend texted me yesterday, he's like, I've had a brainwave, can you ring me when you've got 10 minutes? And I was like, oh, cool, excited. So have those people around you that are doing not the same thing, but just ideating, thinking about things. So to get in touch, I've got my website, grantsclub.com.au. I'm happy to chat to anyone about grants. I could talk about it all day, but I want people to have that initial conversation to see whether grants are an opportunity or not. For some organisations, they're not. And we don't want to be going down that track if it's not something that would be beneficial. And I'm on Instagram, grantsclub_Liz Fleming, or just email me, liz@grantsclub.com.au, or on LinkedIn. I'm there as well, and on Facebook and everywhere else. But I can talk about grants all day. And if I can leave you with one quote that I always put into every workshop that I run, no matter what it is to do with grants, is nothing is more expensive than a missed opportunity. So you need to be thinking about grants, you need to be thinking about your projects, and then you need to be searching. So thinking about what's that one thing you can do today that will send you on your journey of exploring what grants could do for you.
And that is an absolutely perfect wrap up. What a powerful reminder that making an impact isn't just about having heart, it's about having a strategy. And from grants to partnerships to being ready when opportunity knocks, Liz has dropped so much wisdom into this conversation that I hope you'll share it with your network. So the key reminders for me are, you don't have to do it alone. You can ask for help and funding without compromising your values. And the time to start building relationship and sharpening your story is right now. Please connect with Liz, learn about working with her. And if this episode has sparked something for you, share it with someone who's got big ideas, and know that it can be possible with the right support and the right people. Thanks for listening. And until next time, stay bold, stay generous, and keep building what matters. Thanks, Liz.
Thank you.